things that are, that do seem to recur. And a lot of folks on the spectrum, they do like repeatable sort of processes, and they're very process oriented. Some kids will need to follow the same route to school or the store. So, I think that's what you saw there. And I mean, just to be fair, a lot of us grew up in a time when latchkey children were quite common, right? So, obviously this is a family that's got that figured out. And what's fascinating, I think, in this case is that, the child did follow exactly the process. He did exactly what he was supposed to do. He normally did, but you just, off by 10 degrees, and he's sitting in the same exact place, but in a different building. And I think that is a fairly, that's a great example, right? The other example with the tablet is useful too. A lot of the kids really explode when you give them an iPad or an Android tablet. The ability to interact with technology using their finger, to swipe and stuff instead of a mouse, means that for whatever reason that user interface is very comforting to them, and they can access it. And there's so many wonderful apps and software programs that have been created for social, educational, reasons to help these guys by parents that are maybe software programmers. So one of the things that's nice about that is most of those devices also have some location-based service in them now, and so being able to track that tablet can help in a search. Your point about the canal, I think, is also noteworthy, right? So many of these kids are drawn to water. They don't know why, but water and ponds and streams certainly are a dangerous place for these guys. So making sure that you know where that is and supervise them and stuff.
Well, we find that many people, when looking for people, I classify people in two categories: diminished and non-diminished. And everybody is working on becoming diminished, because 3 days out in the cold, you're not getting better and sharper. People that are diminished tend to go towards water, whether they go out there pre-diminished by drugs, alcohol, or whatever. The situation reduces them because of hypothermia, or they have dementia or autism or something else. They tend to do that. And it's funny what you're saying about the difference between the mouse interface and the finger interface. And I never quite thought about that, but that is kind of what made the tablets rocket. We thought the mouse was good when we started then going to the finger, because I know that I've gotten to the point where I think everything is a touch screen now, and they've bred that into us. And I remember when you were saying that, I had this flashback to a million years ago about how we adapt to technology in the wrong ways. And you're old enough, you'll understand this. Cars used to have, sometimes they would have a flip-up faceplate on the radio, and you could put a cassette in.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Or an 8-track. My buddy had been in a car that had that, and he automatically thought all cars did that. So the next car, we would drive cars back in the summer for dealerships when people purchased them. He must have broken 20 radios that summer, ramming cassettes through faceplates, because he assumed that everyone, just like I assume now, that it's all touchscreen. He assumed the technology was more pervasive than it was. And we adapt and get seduced by technology really quickly. But I think this really helps those children. It helps them have a connection they might not have otherwise.
No, it absolutely does. And there, as I say, there are many very wonderful apps that, can translate from pictures to where the tablet does the speaking for the nonverbal part of the population, or just to consume media. So a lot of these kids are very comfortable. They struggle with facial expressions, right? I mean, because there's so much depth and so much complexity in our facial expressions. So what's big with them are sort of these animated machine with faces programs. So whether it's Thomas the Tank Engine or Bob the Builder or Disney's Cars or Planes or whatever, right? And so you'll often find them with a tablet interacting and watching, and those characters really become kind of their friends. And so since they struggle to establish a social connection with a typical, with another typical kid, they'll often be also using those tablets to consume that kind of media.
That I saw something about the it wasn't just about autism, but they had a talk about it, and autism and children without autism and how they grow so attached to Disney. And that kind of explains it to me, because those over-exaggerated gestures and faces and everything they can identify with more. How is your job affected all seasonally? Do you see a seasonal component in dealing with the anxiety that people suffer from this?
Well, there's two sides, of course, to all of this, right? There's the person with autism, and then there's the families and the people around them, right? So, certainly around, the holidays and so forth, it can be very difficult for family members, even close friends, to kind of understand the challenges that an autism family has with sensory input, large, loud groups, different changes in routine and food, and so forth. In the summer, it's more about being able to go places and do things outdoors that are consistent with what the sort of the coping mechanisms that you have and what you like. Interestingly, you mentioned, I work with a scout troop in Chester County that are all families and boys on the autism spectrum. And I often joke that I'm not sure what kind of, bad pizza our scoutmaster got into to think that, scouting and taking kids with autism out in the woods. I mean, as a search and rescue guy, you probably cringe at the idea, but, we do it every month. And what's interesting is that, it helps them, I think, learn to be more flexible and to cope. At the same time, we plan a lot in a lot of detail, to make sure that we're successful. And of course, then the last component is they understand in the scouting program, because of the uniform and sort of the recurring kind of processes in a way a scout meeting's run or camping trip is run. It's quite structured, right? And they're very comfortable, and they recognize that they're part of a social unit. So what your listeners shouldn't assume is that just because these guys struggle and gals struggle, with social environments or different things, doesn't mean that they're not social or they don't want friends. They do. They're just dealing with a more difficult connection process.
I mean, to be bluntly honest, I didn't find them any more annoying than I find anyone in that age group. There was the you're always going to have people that act up in a class environment, and there's always going to be the class clown and everything. And if you wouldn't have told me, I wouldn't have noticed. I really wouldn't have noticed. Now, I did get when, not because of autism, but just because of being kids in an age group, when we let them all out, it was kind of like I had my guys positioned all over the place, because it's like, this just seems like we shouldn't be doing this, because there's a bunch of kids that were sitting in a very small room, listening to a lot of adults talking way too long. My guys were talking way too long, and then we let them out. I mean, I wanted to run for the hills, so I didn't hold it against these guys. But everybody was well behaved, and everybody was cohesive. And like you said, they were a group. Everybody understood their role within the group. They did fine. They did fine.
Well, that was a great day because we had a bunch of typical scouts from typical troops, and then we had a number of the special needs from the autism troop. And we love it when we get to mix the two populations together. We do find that by meeting the separately and having their own space and their own troop, that we can be more successful at programming some of the educational stuff. But when you mix them up, they become supportive of one another, and the kids, the typical kids, actually start to learn, and then they start to act like big brothers and great friends. They're often more understanding of their age peers sometimes than maybe the grandparents' generation who just don't understand. I mean, remember, in 1960, it was 1 in 2,500 kids that were born that were diagnosed with autism, and here in 2016, it's 1 in 42. So the grandparent generation is rightly maybe a bit confused about what's happening here. You know, they're dealing with a whole new thing.
And we had discussed out there that it's not known why those numbers are changing, but surely it's influenced by reporting. You know, we have better reporting of stuff, but there's potentially environmental factors and other things that are doing it. But are there things that people can spot to see if they have, you know, I told you, I asked you about a friend's child out there. Are there things that we can look for?
So certainly at young ages, when you're getting that early diagnosis, some of the common things are they don't make eye contact. They'll tend to want to be by themselves more. They're less social with other toddlers, babies, so forth. They don't point. So, you know, if you have as much, so if you see a small child that's not pointing, that can be a clue. As they get older, some of it will manifest itself as social awkwardness, maybe sensitivity towards loud sounds and so forth. So, chances are, if you sense that there's something going on, there is. And the best thing we say is to be understanding. And if there's a parent around, go ahead and talk to them. The parents are, as you say, the parents know what's going on. And what we appreciate as parents is when somebody comes up and says, can I help? You know, is there anything I can do? Because often there's something simple that you can do. And that's really true with any special needs child with Down syndrome or other disabilities, right? The worst thing to do is to turn away. The best thing to do is to come up to us and say, is there anything we can do to help?
And what if you had a single message to get out to the people? You need funding, of course, and everything. What message would you like to get out to people about what you do and what you want to do?
Well, what we're really focused on is moving from sort of awareness, which is identifying this, to acceptance, which is how, as a populace and in businesses that serve the general public, how can we accept this group and really make them successful? So my message is always be aware and then look for ways to be more and more accepting. We love the support that we get for Autism Village, and we love that everything from the police, fire type services, emergency services to hotels and restaurants are getting their staff our autism friendly training. All of that is about creating acceptance, Mark.
Well, I'd like to find out about maybe getting you to go out to a couple police departments and talk, if you're willing to do that.
Always happy to do that,
because I think that would be great. And we can talk about that afterwards. But lastly, what do you think? What do you want your legacy to be with this?
Well, again, it's all about the practical stuff for us. So I hope that the Autism Village platform grows to service this community and help them be more successful. And if we can create a better future for our population, boy, I think that's a great legacy.
And just tell everybody your website one more time.
So for the actual service, it's autismvillage.com, and you can find Autism Village apps on Android and iTunes. And then for the businesses, for the training, it's autismfriendly.com.
Okay. And I want to thank you for coming, TOPHER, and it's been a pleasure, as always, dealing with you, and it was pleasure when we first interacted, and I do want to follow up on the police thing and other things with you because I think it's really important, and I want to be able to best serve your community when we interact with them.
Well, thanks for having me, Mark.
Sure. And thanks, everybody, for listening. Stay safe, stay smart, stay sane. We'll see you again soon. Take care.
Sometimes I'm right.